Inside of our index.php file, we are going to define a new constant called site is live. This constant will tell us whether the site has been launched and is actually live, people can access it, or not. And it's going to be a simple Boolean value, true or false. It will allow us later on to output certain information in the browser should there any error occur during rendering the page. So we're going to start with defined to check if it's already defined. Site is underscore live, and if it's not, so 2 bars, we define it. So define site underscore is underscore live. And for now, because we're still working on the site, it's not live project, we are going to set it to false. The next thing, we are going to remove the footer from here and rename the partials header to includes /config. We are going to create our config file, which stores all the configuration options. So inside of the root of our project, let's create a new directory called includes. And inside of this directory, we're going to create the file called config.php. Okay, so now inside of the config.php, we are going to start by calling the function, the PHP function called date_default time zone set. And we want to set this time zone to wherever you are, to wherever the site is going to be running. In my case, it's in UK, United Kingdom, so it's going to be Europe /London. If we check the specification for this specific function, if we go back to the browser, go to php.net, there we go. And if we check, if we paste it inside of the search bar, there we go, sets the default time zone used by all datetime functions in a script, and it returns Boolean. Takes the string, time zone identifier, and if we scroll down, you've got a list of supported time zones. So if you open this in a new tab, you can check by the continent. I'm obviously in Europe, so these are the options that you can basically use. And obviously the one I've used is Europe, London. If you're in any other country, obviously in any other continent, make sure that you use the right one for your setup. Okay, let's go back to the editor. So now that we have this done, let's now check if, and we're going to use this constant which you've just defined, site is live. If it's live, we're going to do something else, we're going to do something else. If it's live, we are going to use ini_set, and then the first value will be display_errors. We'll set it, comma, and then the value is off. What it does basically, it sets some PHP configuration at runtime, basically when the page actually loads. It tells PHP, okay, display errors off. So don't display errors when the site is live, in other words. You can again check the specification for this specific function. If you go to php.net, ini_set, and sets the value of a configuration option. Sets the value of a given configuration option. The configuration option will keep this new value during the script execution and will be restored at the script's ending. So basically, when the page has loaded, this value will be reset, will be removed basically. So it's only when the page is loading. That's why we have it right at the beginning of our script. And obviously during the execution of this code, whatever other function we're gonna call from other files which actually create our page. And then once all of the files have loaded, obviously this is going to be removed from the configuration. Okay, next thing is error_reporting, and then we set it to 0. And again, let's quickly have a look at this error reporting. So if we go back to the php.net, in a search bar, let's quickly put it in. And what it does, it basically sets which PHP errors are reported. And if we scroll down a little bit, you can click on this predefined constants for the arguments. And you can see there's a whole list of different constants that you can use actually with this function. Now, 0, when you use 0 as an argument, that means that the errors are switched off. So they shouldn't be reporting, basically. That's what it says. So it's basically both ways are telling pretty much the same story here. Okay, for else statement, and I'm going to copy the entire thing. I'm going to have display errors set to on and error reporting set to -1, which basically reports all of the errors. So this one switches them off, this one switches them all on. So that's where this site is live constant comes quite handy, as you can see. Okay, after this, in the config file, we are going to define a few more constants. And the first constant will be called ds. What it will do is basically it will represent directory separator, which is quite a long constant. So rather than using directory separator, every time we need to concatenate the path to a given directory, we are just going to use ds as a shortcut. So to do this, quickly defined, and we're looking for ds in capitals, and then 2 bars and define ds, if it hasn't been defined obviously, and then directory separator. So now rather than typing this directory separator every time we want to separate the path to the directory, we're just going to use ds. Okay, let's copy the entire block. Let's paste it underneath. The next one will be path to the pages directory. So it's going to be page path. And let's quickly copy it here. And now we are going to use real path function. We're going to first provide the current directory location, which is basically where this file is stored, this config.php. So it's going to point to includes directory. Now we need to get out from this directory and create a new directory actually before we do this, called pages, which is where we're going to store all the files for our pages. So we concatenate it and then / 2 full stops / to indicate they want to get out of this directory to our root, to the root of our project, and then we want to go into pages. So this is basically where this page path will point to this pages directory. Okay, let's copy the entire thing. The next one will be called, and I'm just going to create a few new lines here to shift the whole code up. Rather than page path, it's going to be partial path. There we go. So partial path will simply point to the partials, which we already have, obviously. There we go. So now what I want to do is to be able to use just the file name whenever I require any partial or page, just the file name rather than using, say, pages / file name or partials / file name. And to do it, I need to basically add both of these paths, which we've just declared here, to the include path. So we're going to use a set include path, and then inside of the set include path, I'm going to use the implode method to basically concatenate an array of different paths, which we're going to be passing. The first one will be page path, second one is going to be partial path, and lastly we're going to add the get include path so that the existing include path is still there. So we're going to concatenate them with the path _ path separator. The same as we have directory separator, we have a path separator. So whatever path separator is used on your existing system, that's what it's going to be used as a concatenator for this implode method. Okay, so we're passing an array of items. First one is page path. Second one, actually, we might better start with the partial path. Partial path. And the reason why we might be doing this way is because if we're going to have two files with the same name, we obviously need to make sure that we don't. But if we say let's have navigation and then navigation the pages, then the one that's going to be actually included is going to be the one from the partials, because partials are part of the entire system. Pages may exist, may not exist, but obviously the files included within the partials directory are more important than the actual pages. And then we are going to append the get _ include path to the end of this string. So now if I echo get include path, and if we preview everything in the browser, and if we refresh, as you can see, we've got, first of all, we have path to our partials, then path separator, which is : on my system. Then we have pages, again, path separator : then we have current directory with a full stop, : again to concatenate it, and lastly, path to the PHP binary. So, okay, if we go back to the editor, that's our include path sorted. Now if we go back and open our header file, if we double click it, we can now remove those partials from the beginning of the file, basically from within this require once function. So now we only have navigation and slide, and we know obviously that would work anyway this way because we are calling them from within the folder, that directory, that this file that calls them is also within, so that would still work. But later on we're going to have pages when we're going to require certain partials, in which case obviously we would have to specify this partials directory first of all. But using this include path, obviously, because we've defined this those constants, and obviously we added them to the include path, now it's going to be automatically looking for the files within this partials with just providing the file name rather than obviously part of the path. Okay, so that's config, and obviously our header, so we can save it and close it. Next, we're going to have a few more constants. Next one will be the default page file name. So when the page first loads, what is the first file that I want to load from within the pages directory? So let's start with the defined, and we're looking for the name of the constant default page underscore file name. And I'm just going to copy the name of this constant because it's quite a long one. And then obviously define if it hasn't been defined. And what the name is going to be, it's going to be simply index. And now if I copy all this, and the next one will be default page file name, we're going to change it to the error page file name. And this one will simply be called error. And now I'm going to create both of these pages inside of the pages directory. So new PHP file, first one will be index.php. And for the time being, I'm just going to close it. So this is this one, and then the error one. So let's create a new PHP file, error. There we go. So both of these files now exist. Next thing, last constant we're actually going to be defining here is going to be called contact to email. Contact to. Actually, it's not just email, so we're just going to keep it contact to. This one is going to be simply an email address, the string for the email address when we're going to be submitting the email inquiries through the inquiry form. And I want this to start SSD tutorials. And then in between the two angle brackets, it's going to be the email address ssdtutorials@gmail.com. And that's all we need in this file, so I can remove these lines here, these unnecessary lines at the end. And we can save and close the file, and we can now move to the next video.